Republican chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Peter King, is set to officially launch his investigative hearings into American Muslim communities this Thursday, despite pleas to broaden his investigations into non-Muslim domestic threats like white power or anti-government militia groups. King is pushing ahead with his narrow scope aimed solely at Islamic threats. Over 80 religious leaders from all denominations wrote a letter to King last month asking him to think twice about these investigations. As the letter read, quote, "Building and maintaining trust with the Muslim community is crucial to furthering this cooperation, and we fear your hearings will only sow greater distrust and division at a time when unity and moral courage are needed." So is King dividing our nation and embarking on a 21st century McCarthy-esque witch hunt? Joining us to offer their takes, Alejandro Butel, government and policy analyst at the Muslim Public Affairs Council, and Seton Motley, the president of lessgovernment.org.
Yes, exactly.
I'm surprised not .com, actually. So, anyhow, Seton, conservatives like Tim McVeigh, Jim David Atkinson, Eric Rudolph.
Why are they conservatives?
Have killed a lot.
Why are they conservatives?
These are all people who claimed that they were conservatives, have killed a lot of people, and conservatives like them continue to threaten America.
3 in 25 years.
Why? I can actually give you a much longer list. Why won't Peter King investigate these right-wingers who are threatening America and have killed so many Americans?
For the same reason Willie Sutton robbed banks, it's where the money is. I have a list in my pocket right here of 24 domestic Muslim terrorist incidents thwarted or executed since 9/11. Half of them, 12 of them, involve multiple people, not just a single isolated person, but multiple people working in league with other terrorist organizations around the world. Now, I'm not saying
I could give you a long list of conservatives who are also killing people and have killed people.
There are a lot of the times you start out accusing them of being conservative, and then people like Jared Loughner turn out not to be. So a lot of those lists are fraudulent.
Okay. All right, Alejandro. Conservative Muslims killed a lot of Americans on 9/11, but have also killed a lot of Muslims in other parts of the world. How does the Muslim community best deal with its murderous conservatives? You know, and do you think that Peter King's so-called investigation is going to increase the power and the number of these radical or conservative Muslim?
First of all, thank you very much for having me on here, Tom. And second, I think that like all other Americans, Muslim Americans are very concerned about terrorism. You mentioned before that Muslim violent extremists such as Al-Qaeda and bin Laden have been largely killing a lot of other Muslims around the world, in addition to the horrific acts on 9/11. And according to a study by West Point, 85% of all of Al-Qaeda's victims are actually Muslims. So that's the first point. The second point, though, is going here to our shores, is that Muslim Americans, again, are very, very concerned about this issue, and we're frontline partners in the fight against terrorism. According to a study that we've been doing for several years now, our post-9/11 terrorism incident database, we have found that 2 out of every 5 Al-Qaeda plots have been thwarted since 9/11 because of the assistance of Muslim community members. So when Representative King is saying, for instance, that our community is not cooperating with law enforcement or that we're not doing enough to combat extremism, I'm sorry, but his quotes are wildly off the mark.
Seton, Peter King worked as a lawyer with Roy Cohn, who was the famous lawyer for Joe McCarthy. Do you think that he's modeling himself after Joe McCarthy?
McCarthy was right.
I have here in my pocket the names of 24 communists working in the State Department. McCarthy was right. So you think that Peter King is appropriate to do this?
Yes, absolutely. Look, and some parts of the Muslim community, do you know Mohammed El-Abiri by any chance? He's a good friend of mine. So I know what you're talking about. There are large swaths of the Muslim community that are working against terrorism. He didn't say the entire Muslim community isn't working against terrorism. He has run into pockets of American mosques and Muslim communities that are working against terrorism, that are working against exposing terrorists.
Shouldn't he be looking into terrorism as a whole rather than just Muslim
The vast majority of terrorist attacks in the United States and the world right now are conducted by people acting in the name of Islam. Okay. So if you want to ignore that, you can do so at your peril. I don't want to do it.
So actually, when we look at, for instance, terrorist attacks directed at the United States, in fact, what we find is that since 9/11, there have been 45 by al-Qaeda and its affiliates, but over 80 by non-Muslim violent extremists. We're talking about neo-Nazis, we're talking about anti-government extremists and other folks. The other important point to make here is that of those 80 cases, 5 of them actually involved chemical, biological, or radiological weapons, attempted or actual possession of such weapons, and none of them were by a Muslim American. Case in point would be in 2003, William Krar. He was not an al-Qaeda affiliate. He was an anti-government extremist. His religion was not Islam, and frankly, it doesn't even matter what his religion was. But the point being is that while there's so much of a focus right now solely on Muslim violent extremism, I think what we need to do is have a comprehensive approach to this issue, because if we don't, then we're imperiling our national security.
He just made my point for me. He said there are 95 Muslim-related extremist violent activities versus 80 by everybody else on the planet.
No, I said 40. I said 45.
Okay, well,
45 Muslim.
45.
But that's
the majority is non-Muslim. I have sitting at my desk a list of over 200 conservative attacks.
You like Jared Loughner, like the guy who shot up the World War II memorial, who started out being conservative, but then ended up not being
like
conservative.
the guy who walked into the Unitarian Church and murdered a couple of people. I mean, you could go all the way
pretend that both
back.
domestically and globally that there isn't a gigantic problem with people murdering people in the name of Islam is
or in
a
the name
death
of
cult diversity
in the name of
anti-abortion,
or in the name of blowing up the
Seton. Everyone, you and I both will find common ground at the fact that we are very concerned about Muslim violent extremism. The question, the difference between, I think, you and I right now, though, is how do we go about it? And that's the question. Are we going to be treating the overwhelming majority of Muslim communities as partners in this fight? Because, frankly, we do have a dog in this fight. Or are we going to be treating them as suspects? And what I'm saying is that in order to go forward on this effectively, we need to make sure that we're treating our Muslim American communities as any other Americans and as partners in this fight.
And King did not arrive at this decision to have this hearing in 5 seconds. He's been investigating for a long time, and what he wants to do is expose the portions of the American Muslim community that aren't cooperating in the way that they should.
True.
Oh, it is absolutely true.
I wish that were true.
It is absolutely true.
But unfortunately, though, the way that this is going about is that this is focusing more on broad-brushed issues as opposed to actually targeting a violent fringe of individuals, which both you and I are very, very concerned about.
Alejandro, what, in your opinion, is the best way for America to deal with radical Islam, with conservative Islam?
I think that what we need to do is really look at the U.S. Constitution. I think that both you and I, Seton, are constitutionalists together here, and ultimately what I say is a constitutionalist counterterrorism strategy, in which at the end of the day, what we need to make sure is that the marketplace of ideas works itself out against any sort of extremist ideology, where Muslims are at the forefront of combating the ideas, and law enforcement makes sure that it is focused, very targeted on those particular criminal elements, so this way we can make sure that there's no injustices and we don't play into the hands of the propagandists for the terrorists.
Alejandro, Seton, thank you both for being here with us tonight. We need to make sure that our efforts to make America safer are not undermining our values. We need to put an end to Islamophobia in the United States.